I used to believe I was too smart to ever get played in the tech world. Until the new CFO arrived and stripped away everything, my work, my reputation, my access that I'd bled to build. I didn't plan to retaliate immediately. I let him tighten the noose around his own neck. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's a silent cascade of ones and zeros that brings down empires while you watch from the shadows. My name is Jillian Rowe. And for 6 years, I was the guardian of secrets at Envisage Systems. Not the kind of secrets whispered in break rooms or buried in expense reports. I'm talking about the digital lifeblood of a company worth $500 million. As head of data security, I held the keys to everything: customer databases, proprietary algorithms, the digital DNA that made us one of Colorado's fastest-growing tech companies. Our Brighton office sprawled across 3 floors of glass and steel, the kind of place where ping-pong tables and kombucha on tap masked the cutthroat politics underneath. I'd joined when we were just 40 people crammed into a converted warehouse. Now we had over 300 employees, and I knew every vulnerability in our system because I'd built most of it myself. The CEO, Marcus, used to joke that I was the only person who could bring down the company with a few keystrokes. He'd laugh when he said it, but there was always a flicker of unease in his eyes. Smart man. He understood that trust in tech is just another word for calculated risk. I learned that lesson the hard way. Before Envisage, I'd worked at a startup called Nexus Logic. 3 years of 18-hour days, coding security protocols that were 5 years ahead of anything on the market. Then my co-founder staged a hostile takeover while I was at my mother's funeral. By the time I got back, he'd locked me out of everything and filed patents on my work. The lawyers said I had a case, but fighting would take years and money I didn't have. That's when I learned the first rule of corporate survival: document everything. Trust no one completely. And always leave yourself a back door. At Envisage, I was religious about security. Not just the technical kind, the human kind. I studied people's patterns, their ambitions, their weaknesses. The sales director who padded his numbers before quarterly reviews. The junior developer who thought nobody noticed his cryptocurrency mining scripts. The VP of marketing whose affair with a competitor's exec was one leaked email away from a scandal. I filed it all away, not to use, but to understand. Knowledge was protection. My department ran like clockwork. 0 breaches in 3 years. We'd fought off ransomware attacks, state-sponsored hackers, and even a disgruntled ex-employee who tried to sell our source code. Each victory solidified my position. Marcus gave me carte blanche on security decisions. The board loved me because I kept us out of the headlines. But here's what they don't teach you in business school. Being indispensable makes you a target. The better you are at your job, the more someone wants what you have. And in the blood sport of corporate politics, the most dangerous predators don't announce themselves with growls and bared teeth. They come in wearing Armani suits and MBA credentials, speaking the language of optimization and restructuring. They shake your hand while calculating exactly where to insert the knife. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there: hushed board meetings, consultants prowling the halls, talk of preparing for our Series D funding round. The company was evolving from scrappy startup to serious corporation, and evolution always has casualties. But I was too focused on external threats to notice the danger walking through our front door. Trevor Carville arrived on a Monday morning in February, when frost still clung to the windows and the parking lot was slick with black ice. I watched from my office as he stepped out of his Tesla, perfectly balanced despite the treacherous ground. That should have been my first warning. Men who never stumble are usually the ones who push others down. He was younger than me, maybe 32, with that particular brand of confidence that comes from making money with other people's money. Wall Street bred, Stanford polished. His LinkedIn profile read like a greatest hits album: Goldman Sachs, McKinsey. 2 successful exits from companies he'd transformed. The board practically genuflected when they introduced him as our new CFO. "We need someone who speaks the language of serious investors," Marcus explained during the all-hands meeting. "Trevor's going to help us reach the next level." I noticed how Trevor's eyes swept the room like a scanner, cataloging faces, assessing threats and opportunities. When they landed on me, he smiled, all teeth, no warmth. Our first interaction came that afternoon. He appeared in my office doorway without knocking. A habit I'd soon learn was deliberate. Everything Trevor did was deliberate. "You must be Jillian," he said, making himself comfortable in my guest chair. "I've been reviewing our operational expenditures. Your department has quite the budget." "Security isn't cheap," I replied, "but data breaches are expensive." "Of course." He leaned back, studying me. "I'm going to need full administrative access to all systems. For oversight purposes, that's not how we handle security protocols. Access is compartmentalized based on, I'm aware of best practices." His smile tightened. "But I'm restructuring how we approach risk management. I'll need those credentials by end of day." After he left, I sat there feeling like I'd just been marked. In 6 years, no executive had ever demanded blanket access. It violated every principle of information security. But I gave him what he asked for: limited admin rights that would let him see financial data without touching the core infrastructure. It wasn't enough. 2 weeks later, I arrived to find myself locked out of the system. Not just my regular account, my super user access, my emergency backdoors, everything. The login screen mocked me with its error message: credentials invalid. My hands shook as I called it. There must be a mistake. No mistake. Rick from IT said, voice uncomfortable. Got the order last night. Complete password reset on all admin accounts. New security protocol from the CFO's office. Without notifying the head of security? He said you were informed, said it was your idea. I stormed to Trevor's office, not caring who saw. He was on a call, but I didn't wait. "You changed the system passwords without telling me?" He held up a finger, finishing his conversation with theatrical calm. When he hung up, his expression was pure innocence. "Jillian, didn't you get my email? I sent it to your personal account since we were updating the system." There was no email. We both knew it. "I need those credentials restored immediately." "Of course, I'll have my assistant set up new ones for you. Should be ready by Thursday? Thursday? I need access now. What if there's a breach?" "That's why I've brought in some consultants, just temporarily." He gestured to a stack of business cards on his desk. "Cyber Shield Solutions. They come highly recommended." Cyber Shield. I knew them. A bottom feeder firm that promised security theater for executives who wanted to look proactive. Their idea of protection was changing passwords to password 123 and calling it an upgrade. "This is my department." He didn't even pretend anymore. "I'm implementing a new structure. You'll still have a role, of course, documentation, compliance reports, important work." The blood roared in my ears. 6 years of building impenetrable walls around our data, and he was handing the keys to mercenaries. Over the next days, I watched my kingdom disappear piece by piece. My team meetings were suddenly postponed. My reports were under review. When the Cyber Shield consultants arrived, 3 young guys who called each other bro and wore their incompetence like cologne. Trevor introduced them as our new security leadership. The worst part? Nobody questioned it. The board was dazzled by Trevor's projections and cost-cutting measures. Marcus was buried in fundraising, taking calls from Singapore and London. When I tried to warn him, his assistant said he was unavailable. "Trevor's handling operational issues now," she said, not meeting my eyes. I sat in my office, still mine, for now, and stared at the locked screen. Somewhere in those servers was everything I'd built, everything I'd protected. And now I was on the outside, watching Trevor hand matches to arsonists. But here's what Trevor didn't know about me. I'd learned from Nexus Logic, I always left myself a back door. The first night without access, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Trevor, searching for the moment I'd lost control. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. No security alerts, no emergency calls. For 6 years, That phone had been my lifeline to Envisage's digital heartbeat. Now it was just expensive glass and circuits. By the third night, the insomnia had teeth. I'd drift off only to jolt awake, convinced I'd heard the phantom ping of a breach notification. My apartment felt like a tomb. I found myself checking my laptop obsessively, refreshing my email, hoping for a message saying it had all been a mistake. The worst part was the doubt. Maybe I'd become too territorial. Maybe Trevor was right to bring in fresh perspectives. Maybe I was just another middle manager who'd confused job security with actual security. I started questioning everything. My code reviews, had I been too rigid? My security protocols, were they outdated? When you're suddenly on the outside, every decision you've ever made looks like a potential failure. My team started avoiding me. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Sarah, my senior analyst who'd been with me for 4 years, couldn't meet my eyes when she told me about the new reporting structure. I have to send the logs directly to CyberShield. Now, she whispered. Trevor's orders. What about our verification protocols? She bit her lip. They said those were unnecessarily complex. I wanted to scream. Those protocols had caught 3 attempted breaches last year alone, but I just nodded, trying to preserve what dignity I had left. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I was updating compliance documentation, the busy work Trevor had graciously allowed me, when I noticed something odd in the system logs Sarah had reluctantly shared. User permissions were being modified at 3 a.m., accounts created and deleted in rapid succession, the kind of pattern that screamed insider threat. I dug deeper, using read-only access I still had to some peripheral systems. What I found made my blood run cold. Trevor wasn't just restructuring security, he was building hidden pathways through our defenses. Administrative accounts with innocuous names, API keys generated without documentation, database queries running against our customer information. It was subtle, professional. If I hadn't known our system's rhythm like my own heartbeat, I might have missed it. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced the access logs with external connections. IP addresses traced back to Meridian Analytics, a business intelligence firm known for buying and selling consumer data. The kind of company that lived in the gray areas of legal data acquisition. My hands trembled as I screenshot everything. This wasn't incompetence or corporate politics. This was theft. Trevor was creating a pipeline to siphon out our customer data, credit histories, purchasing patterns, personal information on over 2 million users. The scope hit me like a physical blow. We were 3 months from our Series D round, targeting a $2 billion valuation. Our data was our gold mine, and Trevor was strip mining it before the investors arrived. I thought about going to Marcus immediately. But with what? Screenshots that Trevor would dismiss as misinterpreted data? Accusations from a disgruntled employee who'd lost her access privileges? No. I needed more. That night, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I went hunting for the back door I'd built 3 years ago. It wasn't malicious, just a maintenance tunnel I'd created during a critical system migration. A small SSH key buried in a legacy server that everyone had forgotten about. I'd meant to remove it, but never had. Now that negligence might be the only thing standing between Envisage and catastrophe. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Once I used it, I'd be crossing a line. Unauthorized access, even to systems I'd built, was a federal crime. But watching Trevor sell out 2 million people's privacy wasn't something I could sleep through. I typed the command, held my breath, and pressed enter. The system welcomed me home like an old friend. I was back inside, invisible. With access Trevor didn't even know existed. The relief was so intense I almost cried. But relief quickly turned to rage as I explored the damage. Trevor's operation was more extensive than I'd imagined. Automated script running data extraction, encrypted channels to external servers, even a financial trail showing payments routed through offshore accounts. He turned our infrastructure into his personal ATM. I sat back, pulse pounding. I had everything I needed to destroy him. But if I acted rashly, He'd paint me as a vindictive employee who'd hacked the system. I needed to be smarter. That's when I remembered something Marcus had said years ago. In tech, reputation is everything. One scandal and investors run like spooked deer. Trevor thought he was stealing data. But what he'd really done was hand me a weapon. I just needed to figure out how to pull the trigger without leaving fingerprints. The funny thing about hitting bottom? It's solid ground. The doubt, the self-questioning, the sleepless nights, they all crystallized into something harder than diamond: clarity. Trevor had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that locking me out meant I was powerless. But he'd forgotten the first rule of cybersecurity: the most dangerous attacker is the one who built the castle. And I'd built this one brick by digital brick. The back door was just the beginning. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own machine, moving through Envisage's digital corridors like a phantom. During the day, I played the defeated employee, dutifully filing compliance reports no one would read. At night, I hunted. Every piece of evidence I collected painted a darker picture. Trevor had negotiated a deal with Meridian Analytics worth $8.7 million, our entire customer database, delivered in increments to avoid detection. The first transfer was scheduled for March 15th, 2 weeks before our Series D presentations. But I needed more than digital breadcrumbs. I needed context, legal framework, something that would make this undeniable. That's when I remembered Diane Morrison. Diane and I had met at a cybersecurity conference 5 years ago. She'd been recruiting for the SEC's new cyber fraud division, and we'd stayed in touch. She understood how financial crimes hid in ones and zeros. I called her from a burner phone, sitting in my car outside a 24-hour diner. Hypothetically, I said after the pleasantries, if someone discovered their CFO was selling customer data before a funding round, what would the legal implications be? The pause told me she understood this wasn't hypothetical. Depends on the specifics, she said carefully. But if proven, securities fraud, wire fraud, violation of consumer protection laws. We're talking federal charges, decades of prison time. The company would face massive fines, lawsuits, share value would crater. What kind of evidence would you need? Financial records, communication trails, proof of data transfer. The cleaner the documentation, the faster we could act. Another pause. Jillian, if you know something, just curiosity. I lied. Thanks, Diane. I hung up and stared at the diner's neon sign. Federal charges. Decades of prison. The words should have sobered me, but instead, I felt a cold satisfaction. Trevor had bet everything on no one noticing until it was too late. Back home, I refined my approach. I couldn't just dump evidence on the SEC that would point directly back to me. I needed Trevor to expose himself, to pull the trigger on his own destruction. That's when I found it. Buried in his email drafts was a message to Meridian's CEO. Accelerating timeline, full transfer March 1st. Wire the remaining $6 million to the Cayman account by Feb 28th. March 1st. 2 weeks earlier than planned. Trevor was getting nervous, maybe sensing something was off. I had less than a week. I spent the next 3 days building my trap. First, I created monitoring scripts that would track every byte of data Trevor tried to move. Then I built the beautiful part, a logic bomb that would trigger when specific conditions were met. If Trevor initiated the transfer, my program would mirror the data stream, creating copies that would be sent to 3 destinations: a public GitHub repository with an anonymous account, a prominent tech journalist's secure drop, and a certain SEC Cyber Fraud Division email address. But here's where I got creative. The data wouldn't go out immediately. It would trickle out over 48 hours, each batch tagged with metadata showing the exact trail from our servers to Meridian's. By the time anyone noticed, it would be too late to stop. The internet never forgets. I embedded one more gift in the code. Every leaked file would contain Trevor's digital signature, the SSH keys he'd created, and excerpts from his emails discussing the deal. Even if he tried to blame hackers, the evidence would scream insider job. The hardest part was making it look natural. Real hackers are messy. leaving traces of their tools, making small mistakes. I spent hours crafting the perfect imperfections, Romanian IP addresses, script kiddie tools, just enough sophistication to be credible, but not enough to suggest a pro. February 28th arrived like a countdown timer. I sat in my apartment, laptop open, watching Trevor's activity through my hidden access. At 11:47 p.m., I saw it begin. Database queries spinning up, compression algorithms running, data beginning to flow toward Meridian servers. My heart hammered as I initiated my program. One command. That's all it would take. But I hesitated. Once I pressed enter, there was no going back. I'd be destroying more than Trevor. Envisage would burn too. Stock would crash. People would lose jobs. The company I'd protected for 6 years would become another cautionary tale. Then I thought about those 2 million users. Their credit scores, addresses, purchase histories, children's names. All of it about to be sold to the highest bidder because one man decided his bank account mattered more than their privacy. I thought about my team, slowly being replaced by incompetent yes men. About Marcus, too buried in spreadsheets to see the knife at his back. About every startup founder who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. My finger hovered over the key. Sometimes, the only way to save something is to let it burn, control the fire, contain the damage, and hope something better grows from the ashes. I pressed enter. The screen flashed once. Process initiated. Sweet dreams. I'd programmed that message months ago as a joke. Now it felt like prophecy. In 48 hours, Trevor Carville would wake up to a nightmare of his own making. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and waited for the fireworks to begin. The ghost in the machine had just become an arsonist, and I'd brought enough matches for everyone. March 1st, 6 a.m. The first domino fell while Trevor was probably still in his Egyptian cotton sheets, dreaming of Cayman Island accounts. I watched from my laptop as my program began its symphony. The data Trevor thought he was secretly funneling to Meridian was being duplicated in real time, packaged with his digital fingerprints, and queued for release. The beauty was in the timing. Random intervals, different file sizes, mimicking the chaos of a real breach. At 8:17 a.m., the first batch hit the public GitHub repository. Just a taste, 10,000 customer records with Trevor's SSH keys embedded in the metadata. Within minutes, security Twitter lit up like a Christmas tree. Holy shit, is this real? Envisage Systems customer data in the wild? Check the commit history. Those are internal access keys. I sipped my coffee, watching the panic spread. My phone, my work phone, stayed silent. Of course, I wasn't on the security team anymore. By 9:30 a.m., TechCrunch had picked up the story. Breaking. Envisage Systems customer data appears on GitHub. Internal breach suspected. That's when my personal phone rang. Sarah, my former senior analyst, voice shaking. Jillian, have you seen? Seen what? I kept my voice carefully neutral. We're hemorrhaging data. Customer records everywhere. The CyberShield idiots are running around like chickens. Trevor's screaming at everyone. Maybe you should have kept the old security protocols, I said. Silence. Then, quietly, we're fucked, aren't we? Call me if you need a reference, I said and hung up. The second wave hit at noon. This time, 50,000 records appeared on a different platform, accompanied by internal emails between Trevor and Meridian Analytics. The tech journalist I'd targeted, Maria Santos, from The Information, published her exclusive within an hour. Exclusive, leaked emails. Show envisaged CFO negotiating sale of customer data. The headline was perfect. Not alleged, not suspected. The emails were too damning for qualifiers. My program was performing beautifully, each leak building on the last drip, 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 turning into a flood. The GitHub repository couldn't be taken down fast enough. Mirrors popped up across the internet. Reddit's data hoarders were having a field day. At 2 p.m., Envisage's stock price began its descent, down 12% in the first hour, then 20%. The market smelled blood. I pulled up Trevor's LinkedIn profile, still listed as CFO. But for how much longer? The third wave was my masterpiece. At 3:47 p.m., 100,000 records appeared, but this time with a special edition, the financial trail. Wire transfer confirmations, offshore account numbers, the full $8.7 million paper trail linking Trevor to Meridian Analytics. That's when the SEC entered the chat. Diane called me from her official number. "Jillian, we need to talk." "About what?" "I was grocery shopping. The picture of innocence." "Cut the shit. I know you called me last week. We just received a massive data dump about Envisage. This has your fingerprints all over it." "I was fired from System Access 3 weeks ago," I said, examining avocados. "How could I possibly?" "I'm not accusing you. I'm saying we need your help understanding this data." "As a witness?" "Happy to help however I can." The fourth wave hit during market close. The crescendo, 250,000 records, the complete Meridian contract, and a bonus I discovered in my final sweep. Evidence that Trevor had done this before at 2 previous companies. CNBC broke into regular programming. Envisage systems in free fall as data breach. Exposes executive fraud. The numbers were beautiful in their destruction. Stock down 47%, $8.7 million in immediate market cap loss. Trading halted twice. 3 class action lawsuits filed before sunset. But the real poetry came at 7:23 p.m. An emergency board meeting was called. Marcus finally emerged from his fundraising bubble to find his company on fire and his CFO holding the matches. By 8 p.m., Trevor Carville was no longer employed by Envisage Systems. By 9 p.m., the FBI had raided his Tribeca apartment. By 10 p.m., Meridian Analytics had issued a statement claiming they were victims of a sophisticated deception and cutting all ties. I ordered Thai food and watched the show from my couch. Every news alert was another course in my feast of vindication. The internet had turned Trevor into a meme. Screenshots of his LinkedIn about transforming companies paired with Envisage's stock crater. My favorite part? The security community's response. Every CISO and security professional who'd ever been undermined by corporate politics was sharing war stories. Trevor Carville became shorthand for executive hubris. Around midnight, I activated the final phase. One last data dump, but this one was different. It contained detailed documentation of every security vulnerability the CyberShield consultants had introduced, every protocol they'd removed, every warning I'd filed that had been ignored. The message was clear. This wasn't just about Trevor. This was about what happens when you sacrifice security for politics. I included one personal touch, a single file titled "For Marcus ETEXT," containing the logs of every time I tried to warn him, every meeting request his assistant had declined, every email that had gone unanswered. Then I burned my access, deleted the backdoor, wiped the logs, destroyed every trace of my ghost in the machine. If forensics found anything, it would point to the Romanian IP addresses I'd spoofed, the hacktivist signatures I'd mimicked. I was just Jillian Rowe, the fired security director who'd warned everyone this would happen. The news cycle would feed on Envisage for weeks. Congressional hearings about data protection, SEC investigations, privacy advocates using us as a cautionary tale. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Trevor Carville was learning that in technology, as in life, you should never change the passwords of someone who built the house. The leak was complete, the data was free, the guilty were exposed, and I was invisible. The unraveling happened faster than even I had anticipated. March the 2nd began with Trevor's photo plastered across every major news outlet, the kind of coverage money can't buy and lawyers can't undo. By 10 a.m., the SEC had frozen Meridian Analytics assets. Diane called me to schedule a formal interview, her voice professional but tinged with something like admiration. "We'll need you to walk us through Envisage's security infrastructure," she said. "As the former head of security, your insights would be invaluable." "Of course," I replied. I documented everything before I lost access. I assume Trevor's modifications will be particularly relevant? You assume correctly. The media frenzy was intoxicating. Business Insider ran a deep dive. The $8.7 million betrayal, how one CFO's greed destroyed a unicorn. They'd found former employees from Trevor's previous companies, each with stories of suspicious restructuring and data irregularities. The pattern was clear. Trevor was a serial data thief who'd finally been caught. But the real satisfaction came from watching the internal collapse through my network of former colleagues. Sarah texted me updates like a war correspondent. Cyber Shield consultants fled, literally ran out of the building when FBI showed up. Emergency all hands, Marcus crying actual tears. Board member just said Trevor's name like it's a curse word. At 2 p.m., Marcus finally called me. His voice sounded like he'd aged a decade overnight. Jillian, Christ, I don't even know where to start. I let the silence stretch. He'd ignored me for 3 weeks. He could marinate in it. You tried to warn me, he continued. I was so focused on the funding round. I didn't. How bad is it? How bad? I laughed, short and bitter. Your CFO sold your entire customer database. 2 million people's personal information is circulating on the dark web. Your stock is down 60%. The SEC is crawling through your servers. How bad do you think it is? Can you fix it? The audacity almost impressed me. I don't work there anymore, remember? Trevor made sure of that. We could bring you back. Full reinstatement. Hell, a promotion? Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to me. The company might not exist in 6 months. Marcus, that's why I need you. I thought about it. The part of me that had built those systems, that had protected them for 6 years, wanted to say yes. But that part had been buried the night Trevor locked me out. My consulting rate is $2,000 an hour, I said. Minimum 6-month contract, paid up front. He choked. That's extortion. No. Marcus, extortion is what Trevor did. This is market rate for cleaning up disasters. He hung up. He'd call back. They always did when the fire got hot enough. The FBI interviewed me on March 3rd. 2 agents, all business, asking about Trevor's access patterns, the Cyber Shield consultants, the security protocols I'd established. I gave them everything, except any hint of my ghost access. As far as they knew, I was just the canary in the coal mine who'd been silenced. You documented your concerns extensively, Agent Martinez noted, reviewing my files. I believe in paper trails, I said. In my line of work, paranoia is a job requirement. They exchanged glances. Ms. Rowe, we need to ask, do you have any idea how the breach occurred? You mean besides giving complete system access to an unqualified CFO and his bargain basement security team? I shrugged. Check the logs from February 28th. The data pattern suggests someone was moving large amounts of information to external servers, almost like they were selling it. Agent Chen made notes. You saw this pattern? It's in my final reports, filed the week before I lost access. I assume no one read them. They left with boxes of documentation and my promise to remain available. I watched them go, knowing they'd find exactly what I wanted them to find. Trevor's digital fingerprints on every crime. The board meeting transcript leaked that evening. Someone, definitely not me through an anonymous account, posted it to Reddit. The highlights were devastating. How did we not see this coming? Board member Linda Walsh, apparently suffering from amnesia about approving Trevor's hire. The security team warned us repeatedly. That was the CTO, throwing everyone under the bus. But Trevor said Jillian was territorial, resisting necessary changes. Territorial? Marcus's voice, cracking. She was trying to protect us from this exact scenario. The best part was the forensic auditor's preliminary report. The breach appears to have originated from internal access credentials belonging to CFO Trevor Carville. The pattern suggests deliberate data exfiltration rather than external intrusion. Translation: inside job. exactly as I designed it to appear. By March 5th, the full scope was clear. 2.3 million customer records compromised $127 million in market value. Evaporated 17 class action lawsuits, filed FBI criminal investigation, ongoing SEC penalties expected to exceed $50 million. Trevor's bail was set at $5 million. His assets were frozen. Meridian Analytics declared bankruptcy. The Cyber Shield consultants were under investigation for criminal negligence. And somewhere in the wreckage, a narrative was forming. Jillian Rowe, the security expert who'd tried to stop it all. The whistleblower ignored until it was too late. LinkedIn connection requests poured in. Headhunters called with offers. But I wasn't ready to resurface yet. I watched from my apartment as the empire burned, each flame exactly where I'd placed it. Trevor had wanted to steal $8.7 million. Instead, he'd destroyed everything he touched, including himself. The precision of it was beautiful. He'd pulled the trigger, followed the plan, executed perfectly, just like I knew he would. All I'd done was make sure the gun was pointed at his own head. 6 months later, I stood in the Denver airport, waiting for a flight to Seattle. Envisage Systems was gone, acquired for parts by a competitor at 10 cents on the dollar. The Brighton office was empty, our ping-pong tables sold at auction along with the servers I'd spent years protecting. Trevor Carville got 12 years federal prison. The judge called his actions a breathtaking violation of public trust. He'd tried to blame hackers, tried to blame me, tried to blame everyone except himself. But data doesn't lie. And the trail I'd crafted was perfect. Every appeal failed, every excuse crumbled. Marcus managed to avoid criminal charges, but not much else. Last I heard, he was teaching entrepreneurship at a community college, using Envisage as a case study in failure. He sent me one email. I should have listened. I didn't reply. Sarah and 3 others from my old team had reached out. They were building something new. They said, something with security built into its DNA, not bolted on as an afterthought. They wanted me to lead it. We need someone who understands that trust is everything, Sarah had said over coffee. Someone who won't let another Trevor happen. I told them I'd think about it. The truth was, I wasn't ready to build again. Not yet. The consulting offers had been lucrative. Fortune 500 companies suddenly very interested in making sure their CFOs weren't selling data on the side. I charged them Marcus's rate, $2,000 an hour, and they paid it gladly. Fear is a wonderful motivator. But mostly, I traveled, disappeared for weeks at a time. Let Jillian Rowe, the security expert, fade into myth while I figured out who I wanted to be next. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Meridian Analytics executive sentenced in data trafficking scheme. Another set of dominoes falling. The ripples from that night in February were still spreading, would keep spreading for years. I thought about the back door I'd used, deleted now along with any trace I'd ever been there. Envisage's new owners had hired a competent security team who'd found and patched dozens of vulnerabilities, including one old SSH key on a forgotten server. They had no idea what that key had been capable of, what it had done. Sometimes I wondered if I'd gone too far. 2,000 people had lost their jobs. Investors had lost millions. Lives had been disrupted. Careers destroyed. Then I'd remember those 2.3 million customer records. The credit card numbers, the home addresses, the children's names that Trevor had packaged for sale. I'd remember the morning he smiled at me and said my department was under new management. I'd remember every warning ignored, every protocol dismissed, every bit of 6 years' work dismantled by a man who thought spreadsheets were more important than security. No. I hadn't gone too far. I'd gone exactly far enough. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Seattle, then maybe Vancouver. Somewhere with rain and coffee and startups that hadn't learned their lessons yet. Somewhere I could be anonymous until I decided whether to build or burn. I pulled up my laptop while waiting in line, checking the ghost email account I'd used for the leaks. Hundreds of messages from journalists, researchers, security professionals, all wanting to know the real story. all convinced there was more to the envisaged breach than met the eye. They were right, of course. But that truth would stay buried with the deleted logs and burned access. Let Trevor rot in prison believing hackers had randomly targeted him. Let the world think justice had been served by accident. The flight attendant scanned my ticket. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Rowe." I smiled, still using my real name, still unafraid. Because here's what I'd learned in those dark nights after Trevor locked me out. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a silent cascade of ones and zeros that brings down empires while you watch from the shadows. Sometimes it's making them pull the trigger on their own destruction. I found my seat, stowed my bag, and closed my eyes. Somewhere in a federal prison, Trevor Carville was learning that when you change the passwords on someone who built the system, you better make sure they didn't leave themselves a key. But I wasn't thinking about Trevor anymore. I was thinking about Sarah's offer, about building something new, about second chances and fresh starts. The plane lifted off, Denver shrinking below. In my bag was a single printed page, the job offer from Sarah's startup. Chief Security Officer, full autonomy, a chance to do it right from the beginning. I'd probably take it, not because I needed the job, but because I'd learned something important. The best defense isn't just good security, it's making sure the Trevor Carvilles of the world never get close enough to matter. And if they do, well, I still remember how to build back doors. The city disappeared beneath the clouds. Somewhere behind me was wreckage and ruin, exactly as I'd orchestrated. Ahead was possibility, undefined and unlimited. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not code this time, just notes for Sarah's team. Ideas about security, about trust, about building systems that protect themselves. Because in the end, that's what this had all been about. Not revenge, though it had felt good. Not justice, though it had been served. It had been about remembering who I was, what I was capable of, what happened when someone tried to take that away. My name is Jillian Rowe. I build walls and burn bridges. I protect what matters and destroy what threatens. And I always leave myself a key. I don't regret it. There are times when silence is the loudest scream in this industry. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're hearing this. Are you driving through morning traffic? Working late at the office? Maybe you're someone who's been in Jillian's shoes, watching your work get dismantled by corporate politics? Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more revenge stories from the tech world and share your thoughts. Have you ever wanted to burn it all down like Jillian did? Let's discuss in the comments below.